Welcome to the Fleet Safety Geeks podcast, where we discuss the latest industry trends, best practices, and strategies for keeping your fleet and its drivers safe on the road. Whether you're a fleet manager, safety professional, or a driver yourself, our goal is to provide valuable insights and actionable tips to help you prevent accidents, protect lives, and promote a culture of safety within your organization. From vehicle maintenance and driver training to regulations and technology, we cover it all. Tune in every week as we explore the challenges and opportunities of fleet safety in today's fast-paced, ever-changing world. Hey, Phil, welcome back from the holidays and what we're calling Season 2.
Season 2, Bob. Who would have thought it? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm great. Happy 2023, and I wish you and anybody who listens to this a happy and safe 2023.
That's right. Yeah, we want to keep everybody safe out there and safe driving, safety and everywhere, but we need to train these people how to be safe too, right?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm a big advocate of that. I think that as a nation, we can do a better job. If you look at some of the other nations and how they train, their novice drivers, the people who are just getting their licenses and the processes that they go through versus what we do, and it's better now, Bob. I mean, I had my permit for like 2 weeks, and then I went and I took a test, and I never left a parking lot when I took the test. So a 3-point turn, a parallel park, and a little serpentine, and then I went back in my dad's '72 Buick Electra. And I passed. So I literally may not have driven a mile on the road, and then I could drive anywhere I wanted to. And that's an error. Thank goodness they've changed that now. There's an on-road portion in Pennsylvania where I live. But again, I think we could do a better job. It's just, it doesn't get the importance that it needs considering the startling statistics that are occurring on our roads.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Just from a regular driver safety, just any driver, especially a young driver who just maybe came out of a driver education and passed their test and they're on the road. Are we doing enough to actually train a young driver? Because statistics are pretty high that young drivers are involved in lots of accidents. They might be using cell phones. They might have distractions, and a lot of them are involved in some of the fatalities. But even our fleet drivers, these are experienced drivers. They're probably not fresh out of driver education. They've been driving for a while, but we also need to train them. And, we've all worked in corporations, any different organizations that we've all been involved in, and we all have a health and safety department, and we're doing all sorts of training for everybody to keep people safe. And I think you've done a presentation on this, but the forgotten safety training is the fleet driver, right? In some cases.
I did a talk, and the title of the talk was "The Forgotten Side of Safety." So, corporations do a very good job. Environmental health and safety professionals do a very good job with, especially with manufacturing or construction and trenching, things like that. Where they make sure there are certain regulations in place and a lot of training. And then the other thing too, Bob, is there's retraining. Right. Yes. So a person gets their driver's license, and that might be it. That's unless they work for an organization that has a robust driver safety initiatives. But again, I think it's lacking. It is the forgotten side of safety. I mean, I know lockout, tag out, and slip, trip, fall, and lifting, and construction safety, machinery safety, electric safety. All of that is all very good and necessary. But I guarantee you, if those organizations have drivers and they're not trained, they're at the greatest risk of serious injury. I guarantee you, and the statistics would prove that out.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, especially if there's a fatality involved with the fleet driver, companies will stop what they're doing, react to that, and then start doing something. If we had done it from the beginning and involved them with all sorts of training, trying to keep them safe, avoiding, crashes from happening, we could have avoided that from the beginning. And I think that's, we've talked about this. We've developed a safety policy, how to get all the different departments involved. And I think it's just one of those topics we need to keep talking about, just because we continue to see it. there's a lot of fleet drivers out there. I don't know. Do we know a statistic on this? Do you know, Phil? Have how many fleet drivers are there in the U.S.?
I have no idea.
I mean,
I
we
wish
know that there's.
I should know that off the top of my head, shouldn't I? Being in the profession that
I
I'm
almost
in,
think I should know too.
that's a
Yeah,
really good question. I think and it would be, you know what, it would be changing every hour. So I don't know, you know,
sure.
it would be difficult, but I think we'd have to check with like maybe some of the FMCs, the fleet management companies, and things like that to determine, you know, numbers. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands. It's a huge. People don't understand how big the fleet industry is. But if you go to a doctor's office and you see somebody sitting there who's dressed really nice, that's probably a professional sales rep who drives a company vehicle. Or if you drive down the road and you see delivery vans or construction vehicles or, you know, maintenance vehicles and things like that. Guess what? That's a fleet. And
Yep.
and then not only getting to the commercial fleets like tractor trailers and things like that. Look around you when you're driving. You're probably surrounded by more fleet vehicles than you are private vehicles at any given point in time.
Yes, yes, exactly. Now, you mentioned the FMCs, and the FMCs, they manage hundreds of thousands of vehicles,
Right.
right? Each one of those vehicles has a driver. So we have to
Right.
imagine there's hundreds of thousands of fleet drivers. They're
Correct.
not all getting trained to the same level as the
No.
forklift driver or somebody in a factory or somebody,
Right.
working with electricity. Why is the focus for, and I know why, because you can get killed working with electricity. You can get killed working in a factory. You can get killed falling off a forklift. You can get killed driving a fleet vehicle. Why do we not have the same level of training or attention paid to a fleet driver?
To me, Bob, it's still mind-boggling. I don't understand why. I mean, obviously, again, you know my profession. I'm a big advocate of getting people trained and getting them safe behind the wheel because if you want to look at your greatest risk exposure, it's driving. I did work with a company that they had copper mines, and we looked at their statistics as far as their injuries and things like that in the mines. So work related injuries in the mines. Okay,
We all know how
and then we
dangerous mining is, right?
right,
Right?
mining is dangerous, right? You're underground, and I mean there are a lot of hazards, right?
Right.
But then we looked at their statistics of the people driving to the mines. It was far greater risk driving to the mine than working in the mine. I mean, and it
Wow.
wasn't even close. So they said, okay, we need to train these people. So they did, and their numbers went down. So I don't understand how it is that it's overlooked. It's still overlooked, and I'm not saying everybody does that.
Right.
Or you might have an organization. Oh, well, we're running MVRs. Okay, what are you doing with that now,
Right.
right? And they might just run an MVR, you know, motor vehicle records check at the beginning of employment, and then that's it. Really? I mean, so it has to be. I think they have to get them to a certain level of competency, and then continue that. And I think that should not just for fleet drivers. I think every driver. I've had people say to me, "Well, you know, old drivers should be retested." I don't think that should be prejudiced by age. I think that all drivers should be retested at least every 10 years. And they say, "Well, that would cost so much to do." Really, what do motor vehicle crashes cost us every year,
Right.
every day? So um, I don't want to hear that as a cost and cost. You know, I don't want to hear the excuse of cost because really, what's the cost of a life, right? And maybe
Right.
that sounds dramatic, but it's absolutely true. You know, how many people absolutely, you know, lose everything because somebody lost their life?
So that's a
Um,
good point. So if you have
yeah,
a certification, initials after your name, right? You had to test for that. You had to train, you had to test, and you have to renew that. You have to
right.
make sure that you still are educated and knowledgeable to meet the requirements of those initials after your name. So you have to do continuing education, and you might have to re-up and do your testing or do something to show that you're still keeping up with that. Why can't we do that with fleet drivers? We renew our license.
Exactly.
I just go into the MVR and I take an eye test and I get a new picture, the
Right.
DMV, right? So, I go in and I get a new license, but I didn't have to test. I didn't have to prove
Right.
I know how to drive.
Right.
So that's a really good point there. And then you mentioned risk. there is a risk, an inherent risk of driving. A company that has drivers on the road, they have a greater risk because they have lots of drivers. So if you think about that, we hear about all of these nuclear settlements that come from the fleet industry. So that's another valid reason why we need to do more safety training to the driver
Yeah,
to reduce those claims. And if we
right.
reduce those claims, we can reduce our premiums on the insurance that we have to pay. So I think it's really important that the safety training includes drivers. How do we get there? You mentioned that environmental health and safety does a great job of training to avoid injury on the job injury. How do
Right.
we get them involved, or organizations to train fleet managers how to do fleet safety training?
Right. So, Bob, one of the things I've heard you say a number of times during this podcast is if it isn't your job, make it your job. And that's where it has to come down to, right? So you say, well, I don't handle that. I'm the fleet person. I'm taking care of the cars. I'm taking care of the vehicles. Okay. Well, I'm the environmental health and safety person. I'm involved with, manufacturing safety and things like that. So I really don't handle that. That should be the fleet person do that. And then risk management is like, well, I handle insurance. You know, it should be risk, it should be environmental health and safety, it should be fleet, it should be a collaboration between those three. So I worked for a pharmaceutical. I got the risk manager involved, I got HR involved, I got legal involved. We used to do
Mm-hmm.
training. When I came there, I did a training for all the drivers, and then I would get them retrained every year, right? And I didn't get extravagant with it. It was an online retraining, and that was fine. But then I would also put out what I called 60 seconds for safety. And what I would tell the drivers, like, here's a safety point. You can take 1 minute a month, and I would send it out every 30 days, 1 minute a month to read or see something on safety, keeping it in the forefront, making it important to them, helping them to understand that the most important thing they do every day is they go home. So it's creating that safety culture within your organization. And that's, Bob, we've said it before on here. You have to create the safety culture. You have to have strong policies. We had a whole series on that. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you're watching this episode, go back, look at the safety policies episodes. Very important. We had some good guests. We had an attorney, Cliff, who he's the way he placed it, stated, he said, you have to create a safety story. And that is exactly what I'm talking about, creating that safety culture within your organization.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all really important. As you mentioned, we did that three-part series for the developing a safety policy. Um, that's probably could be extremely valuable if there's any organization listening that doesn't have a safety policy now, start there, right?
Right.
It's not the
Exactly.
answer, but it gets you along the right path and can get you
Exactly
into
right.
the right mindset to do the right thing. So I work for an organization. We do have this safety training in
Yes, you do.
place. We do everything, and I think it's very, successful. We can keep people from, moving up in risk level. The second we see it and identify it, we train to it right away. We try and keep them from increasing that risk level. We use some technology as necessary, but we did it as a partnership with health and safety. We developed an entire. We already had a fleet steering committee where I meet with senior leadership and just kind of keep people updated and talk about, what's going on in fleet, what are we doing for this year. But we then developed a fleet safety committee again to kind
Right.
of get HR, legal, health and safety, business leaders, who ultimately have the drivers and drive the revenue to get back to the safety basics and make sure that we had a program in place. And I think it's really important that one fleet manager doesn't have to feel that this is too overwhelming and I can't do this. There are ways to do it, and you partnership with all the different departments to do this within your company or organization, and they'll get there. They don't want to have people injured. So yeah.
Yeah, and you make some very, very, very great points here. So you have to. I love the idea of the safety steering committee, because again, then it becomes a team effort rather than just an individual, and you have other people involved who are also pushing it from their end. You have to get the C-suite involved. You have to get the listen. If the person at companies, when you're working in a company, you listen to the person you report to. And guess what? If the
Hmm.
top person in that company is saying, hey, listen, this is really important, driver safety is really important, and this is an absolute initiative of ours, then guess what? It's going to become important for the whole organization. It should
That's right.
become, and I've said this before in this podcast, driving poorly should become a stigma within the organization.
Yes. Yep.
Years ago, drunk driving was a fine, just readily accepted. It was kind of a joke, and in my opinion, it's still too much of a joke, but then now if somebody gets arrested for drunk driving, they're embarrassed. It's like, oh God, I'm going to lose my job. It's going to cost me a lot. That should be the same thing with cell phone use, with electronics use. I
Yes.
mean, or just distracted, and any distraction, it should be looked at as a stigma. And we need to do that within our organizations, and we need to do that as a nation. There are other countries where it is just not accepted. That is unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Why aren't we there? 43,000 people died on the roads last year, Bob. 43,000. Think about you sitting in a baseball stadium and you look around and everybody around you's dead. Now
Right.
maybe that's a little too graphic, but you know what? Think about it. That's
Yep.
crazy. Why are we
Yep.
so accepting of this? I mean, it's not unusual. Let's say you open up the paper and there's 2 people killed in a car wreck. Let's go to the sports page. I mean, come on. Do you know how many
We're
people
getting
are
numb to it.
right? We get numb to it. Exactly right. We're too accepting. We do get numb to it because it's too
Mhm.
common. But you got to stop and think for a minute. Like, okay, who are the people affected by that? The person
Right.
who died, their loved ones, the people involved in on both sides of the crash. All their coworkers and friends. I mean, just think about crashes cut a very wide swath. I've
Hmm.
seen it in my own family. My grandfather was killed by a drunk impaired driver the year before I was born. And my aunt's still alive. My mom and my grandmother are gone, but she's still affected by it. It's
Yeah.
1959,
Yeah.
Bob. I mean, it's like, come on. Why are we so accepting of this? It, it, again, to me, I keep saying mind boggling. To me, it's mind boggling. Why is driver safety the forgotten side of safety? And not just, organizationally with corporations and organizations that have fleet drivers, but just as a nation as a whole,
Yeah.
we can do better.
So we talked about forklifts, and I worked for a company that used forklifts, right?
Right.
We had a forklift operator who was way up high on the platform and was reaching to get something and fell off the forklift. Didn't have the proper safety equipment on, fell to the ground, lived, but his quality of life was destroyed, right?
Right.
Um, all operations at the company stopped. Everything stopped. And they came up with this policy. You had to wear a harness, you had to be attached. And they came up with a policy that any employee, if I didn't even work in the warehouse, but if I happened to be in the warehouse, maybe I was doing an inventory audit or something, and if any employee in the company saw any forklift driver not wearing safety harness, any employee can fire that person on the spot for not, following the safety policy.
Okay.
That's how stringent it was for the one incident that happened that was horrible. But why do we not have that same mindset for our drivers? If you see one
Exactly.
driver not wearing a seatbelt, if you see
Right.
one driver using a cell phone while driving, if you see one driver going 75 and a 55, why do we not have the same, mindset to,
Reaction.
yeah,
Why don't we react the same way? I mean, injured is injured, killed is killed. And
right,
that guy from the what you just told me here, he didn't even lose his life. Now his quality of life was probably affected by it. And think about this too. So, well, how many hundreds of thousands of people just last year who were injured in crashes, and the quality of their lives are forever affected by that. Okay,
right.
so I've seen, and you mentioned earlier about being, organizations being reactive rather than proactive. I've unfortunately I've worked with a number of companies who reacted to a tragedy, a fatality.
Hmm.
Why aren't they reacting the same way you bring up and again, Bob, great point, as they reacted to that forklift operator who was injured.
Hmm.
If you get seriously injured in a car wreck and it affects your quality of life for the rest of your life, is that any different than a person who fell off a forklift? Injured is
Right,
injured. So
right,
why isn't
right.
it the same level of reaction? Why, and the organizations that I've worked with who got really proactive as a result of an incident, again, they were reactive, then got proactive because of a fatality. I don't
Hmm.
think I've ever worked with an organization that got proactive because of a serious injury.
Right.
How
Maybe they
many
should.
fleet drivers are injured every day?
Hmm. Right.
I've seen a
You
lot
know,
of them.
some of it I think is our vehicles are getting safer. And I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying it's
Yep.
acceptable. I just think that our vehicles are getting safer. We got airbags that cushion us and safely protect us and hug us. And we have a lot of drivers that walk away from accidents. I look at
Right.
my
I
accidents
love
and
it.
the vehicles that are involved in total losses, and the fact that that driver is driving another vehicle right now and walked away from that. That's great. I'm glad that we have that. But if we look at the root cause on how the accident happened, maybe it wasn't even that driver's fault, but was there a defensive driving, skill that could have, been in
Right.
place to avoid an accident caused by somebody else? But I think that helps make us numb because the vehicle's 5-star rated. It's got all
Right.
these airbags. It's
Well, they
got the
weren't
sidecar, the
seriously
side.
injured. Right. Hmm.
Yeah, and if they're not seriously injured, like, oh, problem solved. They're not really a driver. They're a technician who works in the field. That's their job. They just use the vehicle as a tool to get there, and the vehicle's safe, so we don't need to worry about them, right? Maybe that's kind of the mindset. Maybe that's the way some companies are looking at it. But if we treat every driver as a professional fleet driver and provide that same level of training as maybe companies who truly do train somebody who their sole job is to drive, maybe we'd have less crashes and injuries and
Yep.
um,
Yeah.
quality of life changes.
I totally agree. So again, when I worked at the pharmaceutical company, created what I called the CAT, the Collision Analysis Team. Okay, it was myself,
Nice.
uh, uh, risk director, a senior director of risk management, legal, HR, and also a representative from our collision management company. And we would meet biweekly and review the crashes. And then by determining, we would determine whether, what could the driver have done. I'm not saying, well, the other guy ran the red light and hit me. Okay, could you have prevented it? Like, what do you
Right.
need to do? Again, getting them thinking in those terms. Okay, the other person ran the red light, but did you scan the intersection as you were approaching? I mean, how many times do you see people go through red lights and stop signs? It's a pretty common action by drivers. So what we try to educate the drivers to is you need to scan. You should have seen it coming. You had a clear sight distance. I mean, we did, again, root cause analysis on these crashes. But here's the thing, Bob. So we'd assign training, or they would get bumped up on their risk level within the organization. Next thing I
Hmm.
know, I'm getting a call from their field manager or the national business director saying, "Hey, it wasn't their fault. The cop cited the other guy, and what, like, they're going to bat for him." I said, "No, no, 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 knucklehead. Here's what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to keep your employee, the person you manage, safe.
Hmm.
There's not a punishment. What we're trying to do is just get them home, and you have to help them with this. If
Right.
you're going and going to bat with them and saying, well, I don't think they need to go through that training, or I don't think they should be at a lower risk level, you're a knucklehead. Okay,
Yep.
leave it to the people who know. It just, so what I started doing then is trying to involve those managers, and that was a
Yeah.
chore. But
Yes.
these are the steps people have to make. They have to get, you know, safety has to permeate an organization in order to get to the same level of safety as, say, manufacturing safety.
Yep. You bring up an excellent point. One that I struggle with all the time, and that's the field manager.
Hmm.
Love our field managers. They're
Yep.
doing a great
Great
job.
people,
Their
hardworking.
sole job is to continue to increase revenues for the company, keep our customers happy, and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do. But we always talk on this podcast about getting the C-suite involved and getting their buy-in, right? Because everybody reports to them. If this C-level person says we got to do this, well, you're probably going to do it.
Right.
But to get that trickle down mentality and to keep that safety culture going, you need to get the field manager on board.
Absolutely.
And if you have a field manager who is doing a counter culture to safety, the drivers are going to follow the field manager's
That's
lead.
exactly right, Bob.
You know, they need to be a part of this. They need to be involved. They need to understand the importance, and they need to make it part of what they do. And that's a forgotten piece there too.
Yeah, it truly is. So I always, you've heard me say this numerous times also, Bob, is that the person who has direct managerial responsibility for the people who are driving the vehicle, they can make or break any safety initiative. Either telling them, hey, go, 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 or they're telling them, now listen, safety, now go, go, go. And that's the difference. So those field level managers are absolutely a key to any driver safety initiative.
Yep. Yep. Well, this is a topic that we shouldn't let go of. I think to be honest, this is like one of the first podcasts that we might actually make the 30-minute
Wow.
time limit, so we're not talking too long. So I just want to summarize this. I think we've said enough about
Yeah.
driver training is the forgotten safety training, and I absolutely agree. We've given advice on how to combat that and avoid that. So to summarize, get your partners involved with your other departments within your organization. Health and safety, risk, legal, HR, get everybody on board. Get your C-levels on board. I'm not trying to rehash the whole developing the safety policy series where we talk about that, but you don't need to do this on your own. You're not out there by yourself.
Right.
There's people out there that will help
You're
you.
not on an island.
Don't wait until somebody is killed or seriously injured, to develop this and start driver training. Do it now and put some attention to this. And you don't have to do it by yourself, but you can take the lead. And if you're a fleet manager and you don't know what to do, this is what you do. You can take the
Right.
lead, get people involved, and get that training started.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to come up with it on your own. We have a lot of great suppliers, vendors, fleet management companies, and there are companies dedicated to doing this. If you have insurance, there's insurance brokers that are have resources to help develop to you where you don't have to do it on your own.
Nope. You're not on an island. Reach out for help.
So with that, any final words or thoughts on there, Phil?
Nope. Just let's not forget that driver safety is the forgotten side of safety. Okay, so remember it
Right.
and do something about it. Bob, to quote you, if it's not your job, make it your job. I think that's the absolutely true. And